Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Citizen Representatives Podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm here with my well-tanned friend, Adam. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Tyler. I was going to ask, what did you have for dinner tonight?
Uh, I think it would be culturally inappropriate. No,
Wow.
Navajo tacos. Am I allowed to say
Yeah,
that?
yeah, sure. That's a thing. I used to eat those. Those are pretty good.
No,
I had the reason. Go
go ahead.
ahead. The reason I asked is because we had French dip, and I think one of the other times we recorded, we both had French dip that night. Coincidentally, thought that was fun. But
Well, we didn't have a coincidence tonight, but
no, no serendipity.
I really like the Navajo tacos. And anyway, like I was saying, your shirt just brings out your tan. Are you spending a lot of time on the lake, or what? Are you just naturally this way?
I do about 10, I mean, not every day, but any day that I have some time, I'll go out 10 minutes on each side, get some vitamin D and no
Really?
sunscreen, no sunscreen, just the straight rays of the sun. And that I've never burned, so I can do 10 to 15 minutes and be just fine. So
Do you
yeah,
do it with sunglasses or without?
without,
It's good.
yeah,
I've read a lot of research that sunglasses can actually be harmful for your health. You need that good
yeah,
natural light in your eyes.
that's right.
So this is Citizen Representatives. We talk about politics and how we can improve those the kind of the processes of politics. That's one of the things that I like to do in life is identify something that is not working very well and try to fix those things. Not that we're going to fix everything with citizen representatives, but I think it's a good step in the right direction. We help to reduce corruption in politics by uniting as legal citizens to elect lawmakers with the iron-clad agreement that they will vote on bills according to a majority vote by citizens in their district or state. So kind of it's a it's a big goal. I can't think of the word right now, but it's a big thing that we're trying to do. And another question I have is what would we be talking about without COVID?
Uh, well, we might be talking about a Trump presidency right now.
Well, that's
Russia collusion would still be going on for sure.
oh, Russia collusion. They tried to bring that out again.
Did they
There was
really?
another PP tape dossier supposedly that they tried to put forth, and it flopped pretty spectacularly, I think. Uh, yeah, that's interesting. Another Trump presidency. Would they have? This is really conspiratorial. What
Yeah.
they would have rigged the election anyway, even without COVID. And it may have been harder because they they used uh, so much of the justification to loosen up the voting was because of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, well, he's supposedly privately talking about running again. Um, you know,
We'll see.
the news definitely needs him. Their ratings have plummeted since he's been gone. So,
Poor CNN. Yeah.
well, they dug their own grave with that one.
For
So,
sure.
speaking of the news, Facebook is censoring vaccine misinformation at the behest of the White House. Now, this is from I'm getting this information from the New York Post, but this was obvious from the press briefings that the White House had. This isn't something that they are breaking. The New York Post is not breaking the story. They're just giving a summary of some of these press briefings. So it says White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Thursday that the Biden administration is identifying problematic posts for Facebook to censor because they contain misinformation about COVID-19. Now, they didn't go into a lot of detail about this, and I'm not sure that we know a lot of detail. But this goes this goes to the idea that I think that we've mentioned before, is that the government seems to be they seem to be outsourcing their kind of censorship. because obviously with the First Amendment, the government they're not allowed to do that type of thing. But through the private companies, and many of them are doing that on their own. It's not like they need direction from the White House to decide that they don't like hearing from someone or censoring someone or doing whatever. But now it's saying that Jen Psaki is saying they are flagging these posts and sending them to Facebook. I'm not sure what Facebook is doing with those. I do know that with quite a few things about vaccinations and things like that, they are putting a little kind of a trigger warning, so to speak. But what's your take on this? Why is this surprising? Is this something that we already knew about? What's the deal with this?
Well, my understanding it's already happening, right? They targeted 12 specific individuals. One of them was Joseph Mercola, who puts out Mercola, who puts out a daily digest on different things. Lately, it's all been on COVID, but he speaks to a wide variety of health topics. And I think he's deplatformed from Instagram, right? So, yeah, I mean, this whole notion that the government is the purveyor of truth and that they know good information versus bad information to begin with, when we've had a year to see, well, last 5 years to see just how bad they are with information and truth, right? Whether it was, the Steele dossier to, and then with COVID, backtracking on masks and lockdowns and all these things that they can't get right, still can't get right? They're still fighting this and sort of going with the political winds of the day. But they need to define misinformation, because I think that's really problematic. But it's really crafty too, that because they are the arbiters of truth. So whatever they say is misinformation becomes misinformation in the public domain, and so people need to be aware of that and be savvy about when people say misinformation, be careful. Sometimes it's just missing information, not misinformation. This is the missing information that has been missing from your daily intake of CNN and other news networks.
So Mercola, I follow Mercola. I receive his daily email, and it talks a lot about those types of things. He's very into. He's a DO, which is a doctor of osteopathy, and so he hasn't been in practice for a long time, but he's basically the nation's number one alternative health guru. And he said he sent out an email that said, "I'm deleting all of my." I think this is what it said. "I'm deleting all of my articles on vitamin D." He was one of the biggest proponents of vitamin D, which helps prevent so many different diseases and help ameliorate symptoms of others. That he's the number one guy to go to for vitamin D, and because of the pressure that he was receiving professionally and against his family, he decided to remove all this stuff. So it's kind of it's very worrisome that this type of thing is happening, because if you follow his health advice, you'd be healthy and you would never get COVID, most likely. But
you'd have very mild symptoms, perhaps, or something like that,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And anyway, it's just very troublesome. So then USA Today, Biden said COVID vaccination. Sorry, let me start over. Biden said COVID vaccine misinformation on social media is killing people. And then they talk about these are the biggest myths spreading online. So they're literally saying that because of Facebook, and they're not taking down this quote unquote misinformation, people are getting killed because of it, because they're declining to get the vaccine, which, by the way, they're trying to make this as a Republican issue. They did a kind of a study, and they showed that 40% of the people who are vaccine hesitant are quote unquote Republican. The rest are either independents or people on the left. And the biggest group that they found were young black people, actually. And it was a very interesting study. So it's not like the media has been very good at portraying this as just a Republican issue, and why are you promoting this vaccine hesitancy? And that's not really the case. And people are being able to make their own decisions. And the next step in this and what they're talking about is if you are flagged for misinformation, like Dr. Mercola was on Facebook, well, now the White House is suggesting that you be banned from all other social sites. And we've already seen this before. We already kind of know this is happening. There's kind of there's been information revealed that Google and Facebook communicate, and they have some kind of common lists, because it's you'll have one person get banned on Twitter or one of these other sites, and then immediately their other ones are suspended or taken down. And
I think they call that collusion.
They are colluding. It could be anyway. I use these words all the time. It's troublesome.
Yep.
I don't have a big enough social media presence to be worried about anything right now. I can, I don't know that. Anyway, what do you think about this?
Oh, I can't wait till our show's banned and deplatformed.
Does that mean we've arrived?
That means we've had some real success. But no, it's disturbing, and like you say, it's like they test the waters, they ban a few people, and then okay, everybody says, okay, yeah, that worked. And they kind of messed up with the messaging, kind of like saying Facebook, and they say, oh no, it's not Facebook, it's the people on Facebook. They try and do that walk back and that clarification, but they do this slow burn, and then before you know it, it's like the frogs in water. You start them out in cold, and you turn up the heat, and before you know it, you're a boiling frog. And so, this is the danger in this kind of suppressed speech.
And just like you were talking about, there have been so many stories that were quote unquote broken on President Trump that turned out later to be false or misrepresentations or missing context. One of the big ones that was right before the election was the Hunter Biden laptop story. Right. Yeah. If you recall, and maybe some of you don't recall because it was suppressed heavily, Hunter Biden took his laptop into a repair shop in Vermont or wherever he was living. I don't remember where it was. And he never retrieved it. He didn't pay for the repairs. And so by law, or by contract anyway, the owner of the repair shop took possession of it. Well, now he owns it. So he went to see what was on it. And there was all this treasure trove of information from Hunter Biden, pictures, things like that, and not all of it has come out. And it was very potentially damaging to Biden, because this was right before the election. This was in September or October that this was coming out, and you couldn't even link to it without being suspended on Twitter and all the other sites. And so then, of course, it came out later when people did more of their due diligence and said this is actually a legitimate story. Well, there was no mea culpa. There was no sorry. We made a mistake. But they got what they wanted, which was Trump out of the White House. And there's story after story that goes to your point. What is misinformation? How are we to decide? How are we going to figure that out? We're gonna give that off to a quote unquote fact checker who is funded by the very people that they're supposedly trying to fact check. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, no, and it's them spouting misinformation in order to go after misinformation. So they characterize they characterize a person or an issue, frame it in such a way that it leads to they start with a premise that's false and go to the conclusion that they desire, and they say this is misinformation. You can't speak out against this, when really a lot of these people are just laying out facts and asking questions, right? Like Mercola, and I think the number one guy was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right? He was 1 or 2 on the list. And all that guy, I challenge anybody to go through and listen to his talks and his writings and find something that's misinformation in there. All he does is spout statistics, directly from government sources, and says, well, what about this, and here's this study. And so how do you how you qualify misinformation is to me that's when Republicans in Congress, or anybody with an ounce of backbone trying to counter these accusations, when they start this discussion, they need to say, let's define misinformation first of all. Before we just assume, oh, it's misinformation. It may not be misinformation. It may actually be just missing information.
If it goes against the narrative, it's misinformation. That's what the definition is to me.
That's the bottom line, but you got to get them to state that, right?
Well, and then there was I didn't watch this, but I read a summary. Rand Paul, there were Dr. Fauci. I don't like to even say his name anymore. There was a hearing in the Senate, and Rand Paul was questioning him. Rand Paul brings up all this data and things like that, and Fauci just goes back to the appeals to authority and the trying to reason. He's not using data to support his arguments by and large. It's just, well, you need to do this because, and that's what a lot of these things come down to. We've talked about this before, which is the earned authority versus unearned authority. People using just do what I say because I'm Dr. Fauci, when they don't kind of look and see everything else that he's flip-flopped on. And let's show this video. This is talking about vaccine hesitancy. Of course, they're trying to always, like we were saying, pin the vaccine hesitancy on Republicans. But let's share this short clip.
Is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
If and when the vaccine comes. And it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be, and the trials that are needed to be done.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay.
And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency. You got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus, this is a safe vaccine.
If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it.
If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these three questions, the American people should not have confidence.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Interesting.
This is the most.
Go ahead.
I was going to say this. To me, this is the most non-political issue of that actually exists out there. I don't think anybody goes, well, I voted for Trump or I voted for Biden, so I am taking the vaccine or I'm not taking the vaccine. I don't think anybody says that. Somebody tried to pose today, well, if Trump had won the election, would Republicans be taking the vaccine? I think that's nonsense. I voted for Trump. I would vote for him again. I have not taken the vaccine, and if Trump had been president, I wouldn't have taken the vaccine, even if he had been president. So this idea, it's such a personal choice about your own health and about your own, the information that's available to each individual, that I don't think it's political at all for anybody on any side. But it's interesting that, because you, I guess I shouldn't say that. You do wonder. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel? Do you think a bunch of Republicans would have taken the vaccine if Trump had been president versus not?
Well, just on the decision if he were president or not, I don't think so. But there are a lot of news organizations that would definitely promote it more.
That's a great point.
They're a lot of them just try to damage the Democrats and help the Republicans. There's a lot of them that do that. And so, and with that said, probably most of them have received the vaccine themselves.
Yeah.
They'll just say anything to to get it. And that's not just Republican. That's not just, conservative sites. That's most political sites. They're not true to a lot of principle. It's just whatever to get clicks.
That's a great point. It would have been interesting to see what different networks had done with the issue. Like CNN probably would have been interviewing Joseph Mercola. I keep fouling up his name.
It's Mercola. I know.
Kamala,
I've listened to quite a few.
Kamala Harris.
I've listened to a lot of his podcasts, so I know how he says it. So
Mercola.
Just like
anyway,
cola. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been interesting, right? If like Biden and Harris had refused to take the vaccine, or if they'd said, we're skeptical. I think in the end they would have taken it. I mean,
Well, and how much of it is driven through the pharmaceutical ad sales from these networks?
Yeah.
They would have only lasted so long being against the vaccine. It's just there's so many different facets to this. Again, I go back to what would we be talking about without this COVID?
Yeah.
Well, now we have
always follow the money.
Now we have what's coming out as France's COVID passport, and this is France will require people to use. This is from the Business Insider. France will require people to use a health passport, quote unquote, to enter a restaurant or attraction this fall. France will soon require people to use a COVID-19 health passport to get into non-essential places. People will have to show they're vaccinated, recently recovered from the virus, or tested negative. I don't have a problem against tested negative. But how often do you have to get tested? The policy will go into action in August. And what's such a big deal about it is the fines for noncompliance are steep and may include time behind bars. People who do not present a health pass could face fines up to 10,000 euros and up to 6 months in prison. Owners of establishments welcoming the public could be faced with $45,000 euro fine and up to a year in the slammer, according to the draft text of the law. So this is there have probably been others out there, other kind of passports, and you've heard of things. A long time ago, New York State, or maybe it was the city of New York, they proposed their own type of thing, and there was so much backlash that they backed off on it. There were big protests in France about this. But on the other hand, there were quite a few people who, upon hearing this, they went and scheduled their vaccination. So I don't know what the percentage was that weren't vaccinated before versus how many there are now, or there will be after this. But it is moving the needle. Now, so many of these, so many different municipalities try to do lotteries, like, oh, get your vaccine and you'll be put in a lottery for $1 million or whatever, or get this or get that. But this, the force of, or the threat of going to jail or a big fine, that's enough to move a lot of people. And how soon until that comes here? They've been trying to scare us with the Delta variant. Now, of course, that when we say this, COVID is a serious deal. If you get it and you're susceptible to, I almost said susceptible to dying. We're all susceptible to dying. But if you have other kind of comorbidities, so to speak, or other things, you're obese and your vitamin D levels are very low, and you're susceptible to having a bad case of it, it's a very serious disease. The Delta variant, I don't know much about it, but it can be very serious for people. So I'm not poo-pooing the idea that COVID is not a thing. But for a lot of people, it's not. Like, I'm in pretty good health. The kids are by and large okay with it. And I don't know about the Delta variant with the kids now. But how soon until this comes here? Are they going to be able to push us here in the United States to do this? Or is, all of these other countries creating this COVID passport, they're going to, if the United States continues on this path of being about 55 to 60% vaccinated, at least with the adults, how much is that going to impact tourism in other countries? Are they going to back off? What's your prognostication on this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have this variant now, and I actually, um, there's some literature out there that suggests the vaccine sort of creates some of these variants. Um, I have no evidence for that, but they talk through the science of that. So, but it's interesting how it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters what happens. If there's an opportunity, the media, the political powers that be are going to seize on that opportunity to craft it into, whether it's punitive, we're gonna go after the people that won't take the shot. Um, we're going to penalize them in some way. You got to wear your mask again. You got to show a vaccine card. So yeah, I can see this going on for another year at least. But after another year of this, either I think the public goes one way or the other. They just say to hell with you, or we're so far down the rabbit hole of oppression that we're the frog boiling at that point.
Yeah, a lot to think about. I don't know how it's going to be. It seems like we've talked about before. Maybe it's through the companies, the private companies that say you can't come in here unless you have, a negative test or a vaccine card or whatever. Just with the level of vaccination in the States right now, I just don't see how that would be a good business decision. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah, fortunately, we do have some good governance, state at the state and local levels in areas of this country. I wouldn't say that Utah is one of them. Right now, our governor, I'm so furious at this guy that he seems to he's so authoritative and so denouncing of people. It's disheartening, And he was the Republican candidate. He's gone along with very Democrat mayors on a lot of their issues, but you have states like Texas and Florida and others where they will resist a lot of this. So hopefully that can sort of be a light of hope for a lot of people in resisting.
So we come to kind of the final segment that I'd like to talk about, which is the two Americas. You have something that they're calling Anarcho-Tyranny, and this comes from an article in the Revolver, which I'll link in the show notes. One of the defining features, I'm quoting, of modern American misery is anarcho-tyranny. Anarcho-tyranny is a dehumanizing state of affairs whereby the state refuses to stop violent crime, yet still vigorously enforces even the most unjust and petty laws against ordinary people. Now, there are several examples just off the top of my head. Number one, you have the BLM protesters. Protesters is a kind of a euphemism. They're violent. Not every single protester is violent, but so many of these protests turn violent and turn into basically riots. And the media they did not cover this very well at all. They didn't cover it very much at all, I should say. And there was destruction, there were murders, there were all of these things. There were things that were happening on federal courthouses, a lot of things. And then you have the January 6th protester. Okay, so backing up, unless some of the murder charges did end up being brought. And, so it wasn't like everyone was getting away with murder, but there were quite a few assaults and things like that, destruction of property, arson. Those things were not very rigorously investigated by the FBI, to my knowledge. Now that it could be behind the scenes that they were. Now you have the January 6th protesters, which in many ways people are finding out was fueled by FBI insiders. Now, this is not just my opinion. This is not, I don't know to what extent it was, but there are definitely some participation there, at least FBI informants. People who, they did go into the Capitol building, and many videos are showing the police letting them in. Many of them did not destroy property. They just, by their mere presence, now they're being held. They were arrested. They were tracked down by the FBI. They were arrested and being held without bail for a nonviolent crime. That there's just a dichotomy, a split. There's a division between what is actual property destruction and people who didn't do anything but trespass into the Capitol, who were actually let in. You also have the Kyle Rittenhouse deal. Kyle Rittenhouse, there were fiery protests and riots in his area, and so he brought a gun. He should have just stayed home.
Yeah.
And he came and tried to defend people's property, and he was getting beaten. There's video of him being beaten with skateboards, and he had an AR-15, and he shot and killed at least one person and injured at least one more. And so now he's being held for defending himself. It's on video of him defending himself. So I don't think any of the protesters that night that lit buildings on fire, they're not under arrest to my knowledge. The people who fired the shots that he was reacting to, they haven't tracked any of those people down. Yet he tries to defend himself, and now he does defend himself with a constitutionally protected amendment, the right to bear arms, and now he's in jail because he defended himself. I don't know what under murder charges. He's literally getting beaten, and nowadays you can't protect yourself. This was several years ago, a reporter, he was reporting on Antifa, I believe, and they started to surround him. Well, he was packing, he had a gun. All he did was draw his gun. He didn't fire on anyone, but he got arrested. Not the people who were threatening him, but the one who tried to defend himself. All he did was show his gun, and I believe he did point it at the people to get him back. He would have been beaten or killed had he not done that. Yet he's the one that gets arrested. You have the Biden story, the Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden he's done multiple things wrong, including lied on a federal form to get a gun. We know this is a fact. Yet, so he's protected because he's on the correct side. What are we to do, Adam, when all these things, you can't, stuff that's violent and obviously wrong, that gets swept under the rug. Yet when some people who are on the wrong side of the narrative, they have a technicality, or they're not even doing something wrong, but they now get arrested, and now they get to prove their innocence rather than having someone try to prove their guilt. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, well, and the the evolution that you're talking about from the BLM protests, which led to defund the police, which led to even more inner city violence, just general violence. It didn't even have to be associated with anything, right? Crime is on the rise, all kinds of, theft and murders are on the rise in large cities. And so now you have the very people they're supposedly trying to help are the ones most affected by this violence. And yet they're going after the people that are just trying to defend their property, like the people in Kansas City. They come after their guns for sure.
Was that the lawyer couple?
Yeah. I forget his name.
McCloskey.
But McCloskey, thank you.
I think.
So, yeah, it's troubling. I mean, if you're on the wrong side of masks and vaccinations, you may as well be, you're a killer, you're a murderer. But, inner city crime, that's just inner city crime. That happens. We just have to expect it, and nothing to see here, folks.
To your point, it's the very people who need these things the most that get affected the worst. You have the defund the police movement, which a lot of black people they did feel that they wanted to defund the police. They felt like their discriminated against by the police. But when you actually take polls of the majority of them, the majority by far say we need more police. We need more of this going on in our community rather than less. And it's the politicians. This is where maybe citizen representatives comes into play, where people who are better informed, who are not as swayed by the media as these politicians. So many of these politicians just want to do something so that they get a good review, so to speak, in MSNBC or CNN, so that they get called upon to go on and do interviews. They want to do these things so that they are lionized by the media, rather than the people who are actually on the ground witnessing these things. Well, maybe we do need a few more police in this area. Maybe they could do things a little bit differently here and there. Maybe that's a training issue. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but bowing to the mob is not the way to do it. And that's what so much of this is going on right now, is people don't want to get any bad news. This is any bad news written about them. So this drives so much of what goes on in the public today. You see it a lot with corporations. Corporations just do anything so that they don't get some social media influencer talking about them in a bad way, because then it reflects poorly on their brand. So they have this Pride Month, which is in June, I believe. So every major corporation, they change their Twitter bio to have a rainbow flag, Pride Month, all these things. Well, as soon as July 1st comes along, it's gone. They check that off. They just want to do anything to appease the mob. And how do we, what do you have as a solution? You're a problem solver, Adam.
Oh, well, I think more information is always the key component. But like you say, we're getting censored when we give more information. So it's a difficult time. But I think there is a point of tension here, and people are going to get fed up. And these policies, these inner city policies, these policies of politicians in Washington, D.C., they're going to come back to bite them before they're able to do anything about it. A lot of these decisions and these policies that are implemented are so petty and just reactive to what the other side is doing. Like, okay, well, we can't do that. We have to do this other thing. And so, but if you hold that line hard for too long, the very thing you're trying to accomplish, we know these policies are ineffective. So, what happens over time? Well, I mean, you have this tension rising, and people aren't going to have to go to the news channel to figure out what's going on. They're going to see it in their neighborhood. They're going to see it on their front doorstep. They're going to see other people experiencing this. And so will that cause politicians to back off? Will that cause media to back off? Will that cause them to change policy? Or do we just simply have to wait for some elections and see, usually the midterms are a big indicator of what the mood of the country is. And that may, hopefully we can hold out for a year and how many ever months.
They're trying to pass a big infrastructure, quote unquote, infrastructure bill right now. It's like 4 or 5 trillion. That's unheard of. But nowadays with COVID, anything goes. And again, I get back to, without COVID, what would we be talking about? There are opportunistic people out there who they saw an opening, and it was a big opening, that's for sure. And a lot of people have taken advantage of it. And, it's up to us to maintain, keep our freedom. It's a big fight. People are always trying to chip away at it. And, conservatives by and large, they just want to live. They don't, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but a lot of people have seen it. Conservatives tend to be more religious. So they have kind of a belief in God. a lot of the liberals aren't as religious, and many of them are quote unquote atheist, but they still need something to believe in. And so in many ways, the government is their belief system. So conservatives tend to be more, I'm generalizing here, be more active in their community, in their religion, in their community and church. And that's where they find an outlet for their, for helping and things like that. On the other side, you have people on the left who tend to try to use their outlets in government and in education and in other forms, and in environmentalism and things like that. And that's where it's a difference, because there's so much more lasting power in politics and environmentalism and doing those types of things that can affect everyone else. Laws that can be passed because of it, rather than, I'm just going to be in my church group and we're going to be making green jello salad on Tuesday night. We're getting together and forming a community. There's a different sort of power when you have a big money interest behind you and getting you elected to so that you can feel like you're making a difference. And so that's part of what citizen representatives aims to do, is to distribute that power between, not just to have it so centralized in one or two people here and there that are easily swayed by campaign donations. Now we have that spread over thousands of people, and those votes don't move as quickly. They're not as affected by a single donation or this or that, because you can't just, now a corporation has to lobby a whole district. They can't just go to one person. So we don't have all the answers. Any last thoughts, Adam?
You kind of went on on the spiritual side, and we've done that at times here, and I think it's appropriate tonight to just mention, energy does follow thought, and even the little guy like you and me, the average Joe at home who feels like they don't have a voice, don't have the ability. We do have things we can do locally in our, with our schools and our governments. But the one thing we can all do is send our good energies to the universe. And I think it will come back to us. I really believe that. I don't care what you believe, whether you believe in atheism or, the Christian or the Jewish or the Hindu or the Islamic God, whatever it is that you believe in, send that energy out to the universe that you want change, that you want maximum freedom for the most people possible. And I think good things are bound to come back when enough numbers and the mass of humanity cries out and says, that's enough. Please help us. I think good things happen. So
thank you. I appreciate that. And like Adam said, energy follows thought. Put that out there that we want change, and we don't want a violent change. I don't think that anyone wants that.
Yeah.
We can provide for the needs of people. We have, well, I won't really go there, but serve in your community, do your best, do your part. And that makes a big difference. Number one place you can serve is in your home. If you have children, or if you have, the best place that you can influence to start is in your own home. And if you're having an issue there, maybe you don't want to go out into the world and start to try to change things. This is one of the tenets of Jordan Peterson. If your room's not clean, you shouldn't be out trying to get people to try to change the world, right? Yeah. You need to take care of your own stuff at home first. And once you've kind of done that, well, then maybe you should try to make a change outside. As far as changing society as a whole, you can always go outside and serve in the community and things like that. This has been another episode of the Citizen Representatives Podcast. Again, as a reiteration and a restatement, Citizen Representatives reduces corruption in politics by uniting as legal citizens to elect lawmakers with the iron-clad agreement that they will vote on bills according to a majority vote by citizens in their district or state. I think if we did this, it would make quite a bit of difference. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, all the places where you can find us. Just Google the name Citizen Representatives. You can go to our website also. Please donate if you feel the desire. We'd really appreciate it. I appreciate Adam. I appreciate you as a listener being with us here for this time, and we will catch you next time.